We're going to move forward in the book of Mark, move past a few of the stories there, mainly because I preached on those in the fairly recent past. So we're going, for sake of moving on, we're going to look at Mark chapter 7 this morning. And as we do so, in this passage, Jesus is dealing with another one of those moments when the religious leaders were trying to discredit him. They've already made up their minds against him, and so from that point on, everything that they look at or see Jesus say or do, they look at it from the lens of trying to say, he's wrong, this is why he's wrong, this is how we deal with him and regain the people and all of that. And so as we begin looking at this passage this morning, this is one of those moments where they look and see what his disciples are doing, and they're going to begin criticizing that. And the implication is, if his disciples are doing it wrong, it's because he's taught them wrong or he's doing it wrong himself. And so let's start with the first 5 verses, just as we begin to see this play out this morning. Mark chapter 7, beginning verse 1, says that the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. And the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and kettles. And so the Pharisees and the teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the traditions of the elders, instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" Now, some of you may be thinking, well, they've got a point. Who wants to be eating with dirty hands? But their concern is not about the hygiene of it. They're making a spiritual application to a physical thing. Or vice versa. We'll talk about that a little more here in just a moment. But the criticism is our forefathers, our teachers, everybody in tradition says you wash your hands before you eat. You go through this ceremonial process of washing the hands, and your disciples aren't doing it. What's wrong with them? Look how dirty and unclean they are, and again, this is not just about hygiene. It's not about avoiding sickness. They're conflating what was a ceremonial washing to this cleansing of the hands, but for them, it was really about the show of, look how pure I am. And they've taken something that God began in a worship of him, in a service of him, and they have, as man has done so often, they've twisted this around. It was a practice that had its basis in the tabernacle worship. When we go back and see Israel coming out of Egypt and God giving them the laws, the establishment of the priesthood and the tabernacle, and God gave them a basin, and he said, okay, we're going to do some ceremonial cleansing here. We're going to have some washing that is done before you offer the sacrifices, before you do the worship, and at different points in the service, you'll once again wash and carry on these ceremonies that show this cleansing. Well, the whole purpose of that, in that setting, that scenario, was God providing a visual moment for them to recognize I am an unclean person who needs to be cleaned to be in the presence of God. Let me state that again because it's important to understand what God was trying to get them to understand. I am an unclean person who needs to be cleansed to be in the presence of God. When we start looking at what they have developed and what they are teaching here, they're making a statement, look how clean I am and what I'm doing to stay clean. So that being out amongst the people, being out amongst the world, being out amongst these things, look at what I'm doing to prove that I'm not allowing that to come in and defile who I am. That's a totally different concept than what God was trying to relay with these ceremonial cleansings. And so they've taken that which God gave them as symbolic, and they have made it to where it's about something that sets them apart, not from God's perspective, but from their own mind point, their own vision of themselves. And so when they look at Jesus' disciples and they see them not washing their hands, they equate not washing their hands with being spiritually unclean. They are defiled. They're not concerned about what their hands are because it matches the rest of their life and their spirituality. And so Jesus begins to respond to that. Let's look now at verse 6. As Jesus gives his response to their question, and he challenges the understanding behind these traditions that they're trying to present as being God's command. Mark chapter 7, verse 6. He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, the people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You've let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. What Jesus, in essence, tells them is, you've been going through the motions of this for so long that you've forgotten what it was really about. You've twisted it into something different than what God had intended. And though you, on the surface, you're trying to say that it is something that honors God, on the surface, you're trying to say that it shows your purity, that's not really the case. Again, in the early days when God gave this to them, it was about recognizing their sinfulness and the need to be cleansed. It was the outward showing that God has told me this is how I make myself ceremonially clean to be in his presence, and so I go through this step. Now, as they stood before Jesus, it become a statement of, I'm already clean. See what I do to stay clean. At some point, it stopped being about what God had commanded, and it became just another tradition to be carried out. Its meaning and its purpose was lost in the minutia of carrying out the act. And boy, how easy it is for that to develop in our lives. We've all heard kind of the preacher stories probably. The one story about the daughter who was fixing to make a ham and saw the directions, and the directions said, cut off the end of the ham and then put it in the pan. And the daughter wanted to know, well, why in the world am I cutting off the end of this perfectly good ham? So she called her mom and said, why does the directions say to cut off the end of the ham? I don't know. That's what Grandma did. So call Grandma. Grandma, why'd you cut off the end of the ham? Well, I cut the end of the ham off because I didn't have a pan big enough for the ham to fit in. All those following that tradition lost a lot of ham through the years. There's another one that's told of preachers that when they go to do a baptism, they always raise their hand up, right? Well, what's the purpose of that? Is that in Scripture? You go to baptize somebody, raise your hand up. No. It goes back to the days when they didn't have baptistries in the church building, and they would go down to the local pond or the river or wherever, and the church would reassemble around that for the baptism, and that was the preacher's symbol to, okay, everybody's here and everybody's ready, get quiet, and let's do this. And somewhere along the line, it just, even when they got to having baptistries and everybody was still in the same place and everybody knew what was going on and everybody knew it was ready, it still was just a put the hand up. Well, in essence, that's what's happened with the Pharisees. They've gone through this ritual for generation after generation of wash your hands. Jesus is saying, you don't even realize what it's about anymore. It's just something to do. It's something to brag about, something to make you think good of yourself. But then Jesus takes it a step further with them, and he begins to tell them, look, it's not just that you have lost the meaning of this, but you have twisted the meaning of these things. You've taken it to a different level, from command to tradition, not simply from a lack of understanding, but to twist it for your own purpose. Look with me, verse 9. And Jesus continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father and mother is Corban, that is, devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father or mother. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that. Jesus is stepping on some toes at this point. It's no wonder that they don't like him, because he's not only, as I say, not only calling out their ignorance about the traditions, he's calling out and saying, some of these things you're even twisting for your own purpose. God's direction for them told them to honor your mother and father. Part of that honoring your mother and father is taking care of them when they get to the point where they can't take care of themselves. Same way they took care of you while you were young. Now, there's a lot of ways to go about that. Some are able to do that within their own home. Some do that through healthcare facilities and whatever. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong way to end that. You do it the way that you're able to do it, so that you honor your mother and father by making sure that they're taken care of. But that means time, it means money, it means involvement, it means love, it means all of those different things. But Jesus says, you're not wanting to give up those things. And so you've developed this tradition that says anything that I might would have spent, invested, done towards taking care of my parents, I'm going to give that to God in a different way. And so I'm excused from having to take care of my parents. Somebody else could do that. I'm taking a higher path by serving God in this way with my time and my money and my efforts. And Jesus says, that doesn't work. That is your traditions, not the commands of God. It's violating the commands of God. Jesus, you got to get back to understanding what it is that really defiles you. What it is that it really means to know the commands of God and follow them, versus this ideal of, we do it because it's what's always been done, or we do it because we think this is the best way or this is the best tradition. And so as Jesus ends this direct confrontation with the teachers, he begins to call the crowd to him and to begin to teach so that they understand the difference. Verse 14 says that Jesus called the crowds. He said to them, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside of a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them." After he left the crowd, he entered the house. His disciples asked him about this parable. "Are you so dull?" he asked. "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body." In this saying, Jesus declared all food clean. He went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person." Jesus is drawing the contrast between the physical and the spiritual. He says, you've mixed up, you're applying spiritual to physical and physical to spiritual, and it doesn't work. Understand what I'm trying to say. Understand that it's not about how dirty your hands are. It's not about those physical things that go in and might make you a little bit sick, but this too shall pass. He says that goes in and goes through the stomach. It comes out of the body. The body is designed to deal with most of that stuff. That's not the true issue here. He said that's not what it is that makes you truly sick spiritually in the sight of God. It's these attitudes of the heart. It's the things that defile the heart that make you impure. And those are not things that you necessarily see on the surface. It's not things that are cleansed just by washing your hands and saying, okay, that didn't get in. Now again, God had given them that as a symbol, but it was a symbol of, I recognize I've got these issues in my heart. And I'm showing God that I recognize that by doing this washing. Jesus shows the absurdity that dirt and things that are touched are going to defile one spiritually. What defiles us is our thoughts and our attitudes. And Jesus gives us this list in verse 21, the thoughts of the heart, the sexual immorality, theft, the murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, folly. That's not a complete list, probably. But if you go back to looking at each of those and start comparing to the things that would be added to the list to make the list more complete, they probably all trace back in some way to one of these. These are kind of the core, the basis of all the things that end up being sin, the things that defile us and separate us from God. But where do these come from? And this question is why it's important to understand what Jesus is trying to get them to understand. It is the contrast between the physical and the spiritual here. He's not making a blanket statement that there are not things on the outside that influence us spiritually. He's not trying to say that, because there very much are. But he's trying to say, going to the marketplace, touching these things, The things that for so long they identified as this makes you unclean, this makes you imperfect if you don't deal with this, they weren't paying attention to the right things. We fall into the same traps and the same problems today. We get so focused in on certain subjects and on certain things, and we get so tied up in trying to combat those and make sure people know we're not a part of that, and we don't want anything to do with that, and we go through these ceremonial cleansings and washing of our hands to almost like Pilate. I'm not guilty of the blood, even though I'm standing here giving the sentence. And we miss out on all the other things that are really affecting our heart and causing our problems. Matthew chapter 23, we find Jesus giving this long list of woes to the Pharisees and the teachers. Woe to you because of this. Take heed because of this. You're living these lies. You're doing these things. Well, verse 23, he says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Think about what Jesus is saying there. They're so focused in on, I'm supposed to give 1/10 to God, 1/10 of everything. And I'm going to exactly measure out 1/10 of my spices, of each one of these things. And I'm going to get that detail so right. Not going to be over, not going to be under. Meanwhile, he says, you miss out on the important things. Justice, faithfulness, mercy. You're so caught up in an eye for an eye that you don't realize that was put there as the maximum sentence. You could give forgiveness and mercy and not require the eye as payment. He comes back down to this final comparison here. You strain out a gnat, swallow a camel. We don't think of ourselves as going around eating our food and choking on a camel, do we? If something ends up in our food that's so big it's going to choke us, we see it. We're not worried about it because I can see it. I can deal with that fairly easily, right? But I don't want, I want to strain and make sure I don't get that gnat. And Jesus says that you're so focused on getting the gnat, you don't realize that you let the camel get by. It's choking you. It's killing you. You can't get rid of it, and it's impacting your heart and your lives. And again, today we get so busy trying to dial in on the tiniest little things. Things that we are so concerned are going to be the difference between heaven and hell. And we miss the things that are really going to be the ones that send us to hell. They're choking our lives. And the problem is we get so used to them going on in our lives that we don't even realize they're there anymore. Where do those thoughts of theft and murder and adultery and greed and deceit and all those come from? They are coming from things that we're taking in. They're coming from the movies that we watch, the TV shows that we watch, the music that we listen to, the books that we read, the people that we hang around with. It's coming from all of those, and we don't even realize it because we've gotten so numb to it. And I'm, we can get to the point where we're trying to strain a gnat out of those also, but boy, how many times have we just totally failed to realize what we really are putting in that affects the heart, that affects the spirituality of us, not just the physical nature of our body. And that's what Jesus is calling them back to. He said, get your focus back on the things that really do matter. Matthew 23, verse 25, Jesus continues with his woes. He says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Sometimes stop to wonder, what would Jesus say if he were standing here giving us woes today? And the reality is he probably used the exact same words. It's not about appearances. It's not about looking like the perfect Christian. It's not about getting everybody else in the world to think that we are the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's about really being cleansed. It is about getting back to that heart, that mind, and that attitude that God was trying to get them when he gave them that about washing. Recognize I'm an imperfect, often unclean, sinful person that needs to be cleansed to be in the presence of God. That was why Jesus came. It was why he went through this entire ministry of teaching and displaying the power of God so that they could understand here is what God was trying to get us to realize. Here's what God is trying to get us to understand. Pay attention to the important things that are affecting your life spiritually. The things that are coming between you and God, the things that are influencing these attitudes of the heart and mind that truly make us unclean. And begin to deal with those. Begin to root those out, to cleanse ourselves from those things, to wash them. And that's why Jesus not only came to teach about it, he lived it and then he died for us. And then he had the resurrection. And he provides us with the Holy Spirit. He provides us with Scripture. He provides us with everything that we need for life and godliness so that we can be cleansed and stay cleansed. So we can go through a ceremonial washing procedure that God has prescribed for us still today, where we acknowledge I'm a sinful person that needs the blood of Christ. And I need to be cleansed to be in the presence of God. What are the things that we're following by tradition today? Traditions that may not be focused on the right things. Traditions that may be straining at the gnat while we swallow the camel. What are the things that we are allowing to influence our hearts to the point that we forget love and mercy and justice, forgiveness, where we get more focused on trying to gather all these things into ourselves and twist things for our own benefit without the glory of God being involved. If we're not willing to search to find those answers, if we're not willing to face those things, if we just keep working on the surface stuff, we'll still be whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. And it won't matter how many times we can go through the process of ceremonially washing ourselves if we don't let that washing really affect the heart, change the heart, to get it back to being in the presence of God. It will still just be a whitewashed tomb with dead man's bones. A cup clean on the outside, dirty on the inside. And one that won't be in the presence of God when it's all said and done. Lesson's yours this morning. If there's something that we can do this morning to help you to get cleansed with God the right way, begin making those changes in your life. Let us know how we can help you as we stand together and sing.